Hi, welcome to the Roberta Reindorf Show. I'm Roberta Reindorf, your host and your interviewer. This evening, we'll be looking at Power Africa. Power Africa is an initiative that was launched in 2013 to provide electricity for the people of Sub-Saharan Africa. With me in the studio is the Deputy Coordinator for Power Africa. Mr. Irons, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Roberta.
Pleasure to have you. Let's start by talking about just a brief introduction of yourself, and then we can dive into the conversation.
Okay, well, I'm John Irons. I work for the United States Agency for International Development. It's a premier development agency. We save lives, do humanitarian assistance, help to reduce poverty, do democratic governance, strengthen democratic governance. So that's what USAID is. I'm a foreign service officer, which means most of my career has been overseas in places like Peru, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Egypt, Mozambique, doing economic development programs.
Thank you very much. It means you have a well-rounded experience. So let's start talking about what is Power Africa? What is all this about?
Well, Power Africa is an important development initiative that was started 6 years ago. And the whole reason why it was established was because there are 600 million people in Africa that don't have access to electricity. So as you can imagine, it would be extremely difficult to have a productive life, to be educated, to have health care, to have a good job if you don't have any access to electricity. So the initiative was established to generate 30,000 new megawatts and to connect 60,000 new connections to the grid. So have 60,000 connections of businesses, of homes, and to have all of that energy available. Really, that's a massive undertaking. The only way that you can actually achieve that is through partnership. So the U.S. government set up this partnership where many different 18 U.S. agencies. We're talking about the Development Finance Corporation, which was recently used to be called OPIC. Now it's Development Finance Corporation, the Exim Bank, the Trade and Development Association. So all of those State Department, Department of Commerce, all of those U.S. agencies are brought together to help support and achieve this goal. We also brought together many development partners, so the governments of Japan, the governments of Korea, the British government, along with multilateral agencies, banks, so the World Bank Group, the African Development Bank, all of those donors. And then by now, over the past 5 years, we've brought along 150 private sector partners. So the objective of Power Africa is to help all of these different actors work together to generate the megawatts, to help strengthen transmission and distribution, and to help connect people to the grid so that they can have better, more productive lives. And we're having good progress, actually. Okay. We're actually, so far to date, we've achieved financial close of 11,000 megawatts. Financial close means you have the project designed, all of the finances available, and you're able to award the contract. Then there's a certain period of time when you need to build the project. With energy projects, some of them take a while to build. So we've about 4,000 megawatts have been commissioned. So they're active projects which are delivering electricity, and we work in all kinds of technologies. So we're working with wind projects in Kenya. We're working with large utility scale solar projects in Zambia. We're working with gas projects in Nigeria and also Mozambique. Mm-hmm. So yes, all different kinds of projects, all kinds of different technologies.
Okay. Well, thank you. I know that you did talk about companies, that you are connecting with different companies and you are partnering with different companies. But I think these are some big dollars. And I'm thinking, where is the money coming from? Where do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, it's important to note that all of our projects are market-based. This is not humanitarian assistance. These are not large grants that are coming. Primarily, it's based on the market and market conditions, and we can do as a partnership, as an initiative, we can do things to help reduce market failures. Market failures occur when people have high perceptions of risk, and the risk really isn't there. So, for example, there may be firms in America that say, "Oh, it's too risky working in Africa. We have, there's a lot of corruption. There's like famine." They have these ideas that might be true in certain markets and that are not true in other markets. And so, sharing information about what the actual situation is there, what the laws are, what the regulations are, what other partners what other corporations are working there, what the donors are doing. All of that information can help reduce these perceptions of risk to a more acceptable level. Helping to share information to reduce market failures, helping to mitigate risk by providing financial instruments, or helping to provide guarantees, or helping to provide the right firms, the right partners. All of that can go into making a project less risky. Another thing that we tend to do is to help expand markets. So there may be small markets where there's a lot of generation and not enough demand. So we try to link those markets that have a lot of the generation to other markets. They might be in other parts of the country. They might be in other countries to where there is demand. So that way you sort of balance out costs, and you are able to deliver electricity to where it's needed at reasonable prices. Actually, talking about prices, we've had a lot of success in really bringing down the price of electricity, especially in solar and wind. The prices have come down over the past 10 years quite a lot.
Let's talk about the price reduction in a little bit, but I want to ask you another question. So how does this project benefit Minnesotans and the people of Sub-Saharan Africa? I know you did touch a little bit on that, but can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we established Power Africa 6 years ago. At that time, the primary goal is expanding generation and connecting people to the grid. So we were out in Africa working with a lot of the partners who had some experience there. There were some American firms, there were some European firms. Whatever partner was there to be able to respond to the government tender, or to respond to setting up a independent power production, we were there to work with them. Over time, so we've built up these partners. Right now we have approximately half U.S. partners and half other partners of other countries, international partners. About 2 years ago, we re-looked at the strategy that we had, and we were basically enabled. We were given an additional mandate, which was to try to push the envelope and try to integrate more U.S. firms into the program. Previously, we were working on the program, doing open competitions and supporting whichever firm came in with the best value. It wasn't actually our decision; it was the government's decision, but we were facilitating that process. Now we have looked at what more can we do to get more American firms involved and become partners of Power Africa. So that's part of the reason why I'm actually in Minnesota, is to visit firms, to see what the firms are doing here. I mean, Minnesota, it's well known for having really good technology, really good skills, yes. Engineers, You have a lot of very large companies here, a lot of good intellectual property. Management is fantastic. You got a really well-educated workforce here. So we want those skills, that technology, those capabilities to help support our program. And so we're trying to do what we can to attract those companies into the program. A lot of what we do, there is some infrastructure already through the Department of Commerce, through USIACs. There's different U.S. agencies like EXIM who has representatives here. You have state trade, the state agencies promoting trade. So we're working with them at trying to get the word out about what Power Africa does, and we're also trying to expand the services in the areas of power trade, products, technology that can help the projects that we're implementing in Africa, help get the word out through better, we call it business intelligence. We have a lot of advisors, transaction advisors. They're lawyers, they're financiers, they're engineers in Africa working in the countries, moving certain projects forward. So that's a lot of good intelligence about what the opportunities are in Africa, and we want to bring that intelligence and create a easier route to companies that would be able to respond to those demands.
I'd like to ask you, so you did mention that you came here to connect with some of these agencies and some of these companies. Can you tell me so far any successes with any companies here in Minnesota?
Well, this is the first time we've been to Minnesota. So we got here yesterday. Okay. We have gone on a couple of site visits to companies. We've had a roundtable lunch. We just got out of about 20 companies that came there. So, we're really excited about the prospects of working in Minnesota. All of the information that we've heard is very positive. So we think, fairly soon we'll probably have a couple of companies from Minnesota to work with Power Africa. We talked with one very innovative company who has the solar panels to be able to produce large amounts of high quality drinking water. You can also use the water for irrigation. So we're really looking at Power Africa. It's not just power. Power is used for things. So if the power is, and we're a development agency at heart, so if the power can be used for clean water, which is a big issue in Africa, or for irrigation, or we can use it for sanitation for hospitals, all of these different agriculture, all of these different areas. They need power, especially agricultural processing need power and water. Absolutely. So, so we're pretty excited about the prospects of Minnesota. We hope to come back here another time. In the meantime, we've sent out a lot of feelers. We have a lot of information that we can use to send to companies that express interest. So our message is that we are open, we are very responsive, and we really want companies to contact us.
I'll be very honored whenever you come to Minnesota to stop by here. This is going to be your show from now on.
Okay.
So you're always welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic.
So let's move into the next question. I'm thinking about government policies. What kind of role does the African government play in this project?
Well, we've worked in up to 40 countries in Africa. Right now, we're really concentrating on about 20 of them. Government policy is probably the most important variable in being able to deliver power to these countries. You can do some projects where they're not as dependent upon the government and what the government policies are, but primarily you really need government policy. So there needs to be a good regulator. They need to be charging reasonable rates for electricity so that people can come in, they can invest, they can pay for their projects, and they can get some profit out of it. They need to be reasonable laws with respect to public-private partnerships and energy laws that allows private companies to come in and have a concession over a certain area, say it's a wind farm or a certain area to develop solar projects. There need to be regulations for how you feed those renewable energies into the grid, because those are not as stable. Some of those areas are not as stable as generation by fossil fuels. Sometimes you need to add storage into the grid. So there are more complex areas in trying to and complex regulations that you need. Just investment and repatriation of funds. Those are all important areas. Customs. I mean, if you're going to bring equipment in, you need to have a reasonable customs regime. So government regulations are really important for all kinds of projects. Slightly less on some of the renewable projects, and we are about right now about 58% of the megawatts that we have brought online and we have financially closed on are renewables, and the others are mostly gas.
So we have two videos that talks about some of the successes you've achieved so far, and I want my audience to just we'll take one video first, and then we'll come back and take the other one. So let's just take 2 minutes break and then take a look at this video.
With every light that turns on, a path is illuminated.
When you put some installation like in the darkness, everybody there in the family gets excited.
Access to electricity is opportunity. It's the flip of a switch that allows a business to thrive. Relief for a worried mother. The spark that fuels the next big idea. And it's the connection that's needed to plug Africa into the global economy. Power Africa, a U.S. government-led partnership, is creating that connection, doubling access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa, using the rich resources of the African sun, wind, streams, lakes, and natural gas, investing in technologies that expand the grid and reach beyond power lines. Thanks to Power Africa, the rushing waters of a river will light a town. Students can count on solar fields to light their path. And the bubbling gas under an African Great Lake fuels the only floating methane extraction plant in the world. Power Africa brings together the greatest innovators, top companies, and countries to spur Africa's energy revolution. With these partnerships, we've mobilized billions of dollars in investment and broken down barriers to speed up power projects. Our work is shining a light on an untapped market, and investors are taking notice. Power Africa will generate 30,000 more megawatts of electricity and electrify another 60 million homes and businesses. It's ambitious but achievable.
There's nothing more exciting than being present when our customers turn on their lights or their TVs.
And by teaching the next generation, Africa will lead its energy future.
If more kids become engineers with the necessary tools, they can transform Africa.
The future is bright. Join us.
So we are back. We were just watching a video on Power Africa. Power Africa is an initiative that was launched in 2013 to provide electricity to sub-Saharan Africa. So that was a fantastic video. You are doing a lot of progress. My next question is, are there a particular country that you are prioritizing and why?
Well, I mean, people tend to think of Africa as I mean, my daughter. She calls it Africa. She went to Mozambique, but she thinks all of Africa is Mozambique. She's only 13, but still, I think sometimes people think of Africa as being, one specific, sort of like a state.
Right.
But there are so many thousands of different, languages, cultures, ethnicities, and the same thing goes with the markets for energy. I mean, almost every country, there's different strengths and weaknesses within countries.
Absolutely.
With respect to the power sector, and there are different strengths and weaknesses between countries. Some countries have a lot of, like Kenya has thermal options for power. Mozambique has massive gas reserves off the coast. There's some countries that have very good options for wind. We're looking at Botswana and Namibia, which have very small populations, very, very low populations, but have extremely, high quality solar radiation. So looking at doing mega projects there where you can set up the projects there and you can transmit the electricity to high demand markets like South Africa, which is experiencing brownouts now because they don't have enough power. So really it's there. Each country is different, and we basically tailor the program because it is market driven and it is private sector driven. So it's not like we're saying, well, we're going to go do wind and then we're only going to go to the places where they're doing wind. We do all kinds of different technologies and we adapt the program because it just happens naturally. These are the companies that have those capacities, and they're focusing on certain areas because that's what makes sense from a market perspective. That's the same way we're doing. We're helping to facilitate those barriers that are specific to that market and bring companies together, help provide services to them, and just it's not even a design. It's just focusing on that country. So we have about 20 countries that we're working on. We have very large programs in Nigeria, in Kenya. It's a big program in Ghana also where you come from.
Let's talk about Ghana a little bit because I was wondering whether it's going to be one of the lists on the priority list. And so I haven't had Ghana until now. So can we talk a little bit about Ghana? What you're doing there?
Sure. Well, I haven't spent a lot of time in Ghana. I went there very for a quick period of time on a TDY, maybe a few years ago. And we do have country officers and we have relationship managers, and they're all focused on knowing the exact environment. And AID has missions there, and some of our partners, I'm sure, like Foreign Commercial Service, they have a presence there in Ghana. In Ghana, we've done a lot.
Let's talk about a little bit of a lot.
Yeah, so we facilitated, I'm not sure how many megawatts, but it's quite a few megawatts in Ghana. We worked on a number of different specific projects. Right now, we and the African Development Bank are looking at transmission from Ghana to neighboring countries. Ghana is pretty key market in West Africa.
Absolutely.
Key ECOWAS member. So trade through Ghana, including electricity trade, is that West African power pool. It's a key member of that whole power pool. So we've done, I think, probably across the board. I'm not exactly sure, but we worked with the government on regulations. I was recently at a African Energy Marketplace, which is a conference sponsored by the AFDB. We work closely with them on that conference where 5 countries from, it was Angola, Ghana, it was in Cote d'Ivoire, but Angola, Ghana, Madagascar, Ethiopia all came, and the deputy minister for energy from Ghana came, and they really outlined what some of the priorities are in the country to try to expand generation. Actually, in Ghana, they have an ironic problem now that they're projecting to have too much electricity generation. So they've signed agreements. They've gotten investors. The investors are there, and now the government is having a hard time ensuring that the return to those investors is satisfactory according to the contract. So the government is looking at trying to renegotiate contracts, which is a very that's a very sensitive issue when you have people that have come in, invested in that country, are kind of tied to the country because they have investments of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. So it's really important that governments stand by and follow through on what they have, what they've agreed to. So
I'm excited about what you said about Ghana because, as you know, that's where I'm from, and I'm reading a lot about actually the western part of Africa. So Ghana, Togo, Nigeria, and Ivory Coast, and Liberia. But I'll speak more for Ghana. You know, I think Ghana is becoming very, it's very stable compared to the rest of the surrounding countries. It has been able to, really innovate itself, and now the government is saying we want investors to come. So I thought that was a plus there, to hear that Ghana is part of on your list. But I also heard that you did mention about certain corruption issues people will be thinking about. You know, Africa is a very corrupt country. How can we invest? What can we do? Are there some checks and balances in place, you think, that can be able to handle these things, perception that people have?
Yeah, I think I mentioned corruption before we started the interview, but and I would not have associated that word with Ghana.
Right.
Ghana, I think, just is in a situation where they sort of inadvertently have promoted generation, too highly without too much without thinking about what the real demand is. So now I think after some years they will overcome this.
Right.
They'll be able to establish connections to neighboring markets where there is demand.
Absolutely.
And be able to work through this. But it is a very sensitive time now for Ghana, for the government of Ghana, because that's sort of one of the worst signals to be trying to renegotiate contracts to the international community, international investors. So I agree that Ghana, there's a lot of promise there. It's one of the more stable countries. Yeah, it has been a very big partner for Power Africa and for AID and for other development agencies. So,
absolutely.
I mean, I think you compare that part to areas further north and west, the Sahel. I mean, those countries are having much more difficulty in attracting investment. So we're working with the African Development Bank. It's a large program called Desert to Power that they're launching. So really focusing on renewables in those areas. A lot of it is off grid. So I think we're a lot of companies from East Africa that have been successful in East Africa. These smaller African companies are able to set up off-grid programs there. So we're pretty excited about that too. I mean, it's lots, and every economy goes through cycles. So stages, yeah, and cycles, and some where they're growing quickly, and some where they taper off a little bit,
Absolutely.
and some regulations facilitate different things at different times. So I think overall we're positive about the initiative. So it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting.
I'm very excited too.
Yeah.
With that, let's just take our last video.
Okay.
I think that the viewers want to see what you're doing and get excited with us too.
Okay.
All right, let's take our next video then.
Megan?
Thank you so much.
It's my playlist.
Yeah, I want to hear about. I want to connect to Ronald's personal journey.
And we've been around 120 years.
Family-owned business started in 1922.
So what opportunities do you see from Power Africa?
I see a lot of opportunity for you to help us identify markets.
Power Africa can help us get into markets where sustainable fuels are needed that are clean and efficient.
There are 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa who don't have access to electricity. Okay? That's a 600 million person opportunity.
guest, Mr. Ion. Let's move on with our discussion. So what does success look like? And how can we measure that?
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of metrics for measuring success, and we are being successful. And I'll get to that.
Okay.
You know, when you said, oh, it's exciting, it just reminded me of a little story.
Sure.
So I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Malawi, and this was way back in 88 and 89, so a long time ago.
Right.
A lot of things have happened in Malawi, but when I was in Malawi, I was there developing savings and credit cooperatives, and I would go to a lot of the rural areas. And the typical sort of back then in the rural areas, they were dirt roads, they were you know, mud huts with thatch on the roofs, and you know, they didn't really have much of anything at all. Small farms. They always had nice school uniforms. They treated education extremely, you know, much valued education, and it was named the Warm Heart of Africa.
Oh.
You know, I had a fantastic experience in there. That people seemed very happy. They had nothing, so it taught me a lot as a volunteer. But then when I went back to 30 years later, in my current job.
Right.
To Mozambique, which is just right next door to Malawi. And I got there about a week after I got there. I took a tour in some of the rural areas, and I was driving around, and I saw the same dirt roads, the same mud huts, the same thatch on the roof. You know, people going down to the well to draw their water, so there was no water. There were no electricity lines there. I actually felt very bad. Like, oh, what has happened over the last 30 years?
Right.
Not much. But then it started to get dark, and I noticed some lights, and I just stopped on the side of the road. I went to one of these small thatched houses, and they basically had the solar home kit. They had a light there. They had a television. They had, you know, batteries. They had a cell phone.
Right.
And just right there, even though they didn't, and they were so excited. I mean, they are very friendly and very open in most of the rural areas that I've been in Africa. They are very excited to welcome me in. They gave me some tea, and they were just explaining how much just that small amount of electricity, to be able to, you know, charge the cell phone, to have electricity at night, and to have communications, had really, you know, it has a big impact on their lives. You could tell because they were just smiling a lot, just explaining, you know, explaining that. So, yeah, to have good communications, to be able to study at night, to be able to get information over your phone, you know, all of those were just it seems like on the outside nothing had changed, but their lives, you know, even access to information about, you know, agricultural markets, all kinds of knowing what's happening in the country in terms of politics. That's all really important. So yeah, it made me feel really good and happy to see that. So that was right before I joined here, before I joined Power Africa. That's one of the reasons why I was very excited about coming back to Washington and getting involved in this specific initiative. So you asked me, I mean, that's sort of what success looks like to me.
Absolutely.
But we actually have, I mean, we achieved financial close on 10,000 megawatts, have commissioned 4,000 megawatts. It's 123 projects that we've financially closed upon in all different areas. So, you know, just the fact that we have all of these partnerships, we have signed agreements, you know, everyone is behind this. Actually, another sort of anecdote was when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Malawi, I was with my boss, a Malawian, and I remember very distinctly we were, I think, just we were asking like a woman for directions.
Right.
So she was like looking down when she gave us the answer. She was looking down like this and saying and talking to us and stuff like that. And for me, as a young person from the U.S. recently arrived there, it seemed kind of strange. And he was saying, "Oh, look at her! look at her, she's so polite. She's so polite, she can't even look at you. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's kind of strange to me.
Right.
So the other major change, when I see going back to the neighboring country in Mozambique, 30 years later, it is amazing, how sort of far along women have come, and we do have some specific programs in Power Africa. It's called the Young African Leaders Initiative, where it's broader than Power. So it is focusing on, all men and women, young leaders, getting them like some education. Some study tours, and get it sort of like broadening their horizons a little bit. But what we've done in Power Africa is take a certain cohort of young women Africans, giving them in the energy sector, giving them education, internships, and opportunities, and the way they have been able to sort of take that and to move to the next level. We have women that have become board members, heads of utilities. So really, I think that a lot of the dynamism and some of the growth that you've seen in Africa over the past 10 years is really because they are taking full advantage, not only on the farm, but taking full advantage of educating the women, and giving them, modifying regulations, giving them the authority to move forward. Africa never really had such big issues in terms of like other parts of the world.
Right.
But still, the way from my personal experience over the past couple of decades, it seems to be women are really coming to the fore and contributing to the economy, contributing to jobs, and Power Africa is definitely doing its share in helping to create that change. So I think that's also what success looks like.
I think it's successful. Just listening to the stories that you shared about that little light, and the fact that to them, because it's able to produce, they can be able to use that for their cell phones, to charge their cell phone and do other things. I think that's successful.
Yeah.
And just the fact that they, have this smile on their face. I see that as successful. But I would like you to come back and talk about, I'm a woman, so I like to hear things pertaining to women, rising up, trying to take their place, trying to take their position, or find a space where they can also contribute to society. And I like that idea that, that you're training new young leaders to get to that place. Let's talk about that another time when you come around.
Oh,
and
okay.
I will be very grateful if you come around. We have 4 minutes, and is there something that I haven't asked that you would like to talk about? And I believe there's plenty of them.
Yeah. I mean, since we are in Minnesota,
right.
I'd really the reason why I'm doing this program is because we want to hear from U.S. companies. U.S. companies have the best technology, the best quality. We have the best engineers. A lot of the products, a lot of the systems, especially some of the systems, which basically what we're trying to do at Power Africa also is to increase the standards, improve the standards, so that these are international standards, so that American companies, because we are very good value, very good quality, if governments procure based on international standards, then Americans, it's sort of a level playing field for American firms, and we believe that American firms will win and will be able to do the business and will be able to sell their products, because these are based on good value international standards. So what we're doing here is really just getting the word out. Your program is helping us very much. Thank you to get the word out. If any companies are interested in learning more about Power Africa, how we do it, what we do, who our partners are, we just really wish you would reach out to us. And we have a team of people that work specifically with companies, trying to get them the information that they need to get involved in the program. We have what we call industry leads, who are specialists in certain kinds of technologies. So we have a solar power specialist, so they also can provide good information. We have country desk officers who know a lot of in-depth information about specific countries, and we can bring all that to bear in trying to get services and information to the countries from the Minnesota.
Well, Mr. Ian, I'm incredibly honored that you stopped by here at the studio. I can't wait for the next discussion whenever you stop by Minnesota.
Oh.
So would you please come back and let's talk more. I want us to talk more about trade investment and export and import. I also want us to talk about U.S. aid because you did mention those in your piece, and I think that we want the audience to also know about import and export. What kind of product can you take from the U.S. to maybe Africa or anywhere sub-Saharan Africa? Or what can you also bring from Africa to here? What business model is working in America that is not working in Africa? Or what kind of business model is working in Africa that perhaps we can be able to bring it here just to help people to get into those arenas?
Yeah.
So it's been a pleasure having you.
Those are fantastic topics. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the companies that are going to contact us and get involved.
I think they are going to contact you because
great.
you have some very positive things that you're doing. And I think that's very positive. So they should contact you, and they must contact you.
Okay.
We want to grow United States economy and want to grow other countries as well. So when we all do better, we all do better.
Yeah.
And when we all do better, then we are okay, right?
Exactly.
So thank you again for coming to the studio. Please feel free to stop by anytime. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So you've been watching the Roberta Reindorf Show. Our topic today have been Power Africa, and as I mentioned, Power Africa is an initiative that was launched back in 2013 to produce electricity to the people of sub-Saharan Africa. I want you to call and contact Mr. Ian. Go on the website, look for them, and connect with them, and get into some business negotiations. Know more about it. Go on the internet, wherever you have to go to find who they are. You can also contact me, and I'll make sure that you connect with them to do this. Good afternoon, and thank you very much.